this exciting episode, we find that James Coburn is the kind of editor who specializes in the magazines that Rennie from the Case of the Red Riding Boots hangs from his bedroom walls. And guess who's working overtime on the case? That wolf, Paul Drake. Aren't we envious? It's Perry Mason, Season 4, Episode 13, The Case of the Envious Editor. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose is pretty simple. Provide an audio companion to every episode of television's greatest legal drama, Perry Mason. Each episode, we give you a summary of the plot. We even compare plots with the Earl Stanley Gardner novel, if the episode was an adaptation. We give you a little trivia, reveal the episode's theme, and then revel in a Perry proverb, a pearl of wisdom from the man himself, before we head to the water cooler where, just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can discuss the ins and outs of our fave legal cruise adventures. But first, say it with me, to the law library! Each time we visit the law library, we discuss a legal conundrum from Perry's case that helps us set future courtroom precedents. In this episode's visit to the law library, we discuss public decency. Publisher Edmund Aitken doesn't like the salacious direction his magazine is going in, thanks to his new editor, Donald Fletcher. Here's Perry's comment.
Literary integrity and good taste are not legal problems except in libel suits or when the laws covering public decency have been violated. Only the post office can really stop men like you, Mr. Fletcher.
Intriguing and worth remarking on. Number one, it's not a crime to write bad literature or have bad taste. But if you commit libel, you're in trouble. Maybe because the name Aitken is on the magazine, we could be talking libel by the editor? Unlikely, however. Number two, decency laws. Those are also known as obscenity laws, designed to protect the public from exposure to content that's considered obscene, lewd, or offensive. The definition of what constitutes obscenity, however, notoriously subjective. Two cases worth noting here. The first, Roth v. United States, 1957. Roth was mailing dirty books. That case decision by the Supreme Court established that obscene material was, quote, utterly without redeeming social importance. That definition was superseded by a 1973 case involving California, Miller v. California, which made its way to the Supreme Court. Miller was conducting a mass mailing campaign for adult magazines. The ensuing criminal trial established the Miller test for obscenity, which deemed any matter that, quote, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, and, quote, appeals to prurient interests as obscene, and thus not protected by the First Amendment. Now, let's get to the plot of this episode. Donald Fletcher hates cold journalism, the kind trafficked in by the Aitken publishing complex.
A missile, a house, and a day. All cold as ice. Nothing to make a customer stop, look, and buy.
What does Donald Fletcher suggest in its place? Proto-versions of Maxim magazine.
The new covers will illustrate our new policy. Woman's viewpoint will deal frankly with sex from the point of view of the woman. Aitken's home magazine will concern itself with a place where it presents its greatest problems. And Aitken's weekly will concentrate on exposing its scandalous results.
But Edmund Aitken doesn't like it. Not one bit.
Decency means nothing to a man who does not know what it is. His idea of literature is the scribbling on washroom walls.
Donald Fletcher invites one and all to his pseudo-hip bachelor plat and plays jazz, 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 generic jazz. Just a little too loud for the neighbors' liking.
Yes? No, I won't turn it down. I like music loud.
Donald Fletcher also knows Aitken's wife when he sees her. And don't forget the wife's handler, Sister Millie Nash.
You know, it's funny with you blue bloods. Every now and then you've just got to get some of that good red blood in to improve the strain. Millie Nash. You call me in the morning.
Cut to an aging Art Garfunkel. No, I'm sorry for the mistake. That's just down on his luck poet Ben Nicholson consulting Perry.
I named my magazine The Pleiades after the 7 daughters of Atlas who died and went to heaven to become a group of stars. That constellation rises in May and sets in November. It is now November. My creditor's children are cold and hungry.
Then Edmund Aiken comes in to Perry's office, also asking for help.
We'll check every possibility of getting to him legally.
You're giving me some hope, Mr. Mason.
Don't get your hopes too high, Mr. Aitken. Men like Fletcher have a way of hiding their sins.
When Aitken and Nicholson meet, Nicholson pedantically recites Richard Cory by Edward Arlington Robinson.
So on we worked and waited for the light, and went without the meat and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head.
Hate to burst your bubble, dude, but it's 1960. Are you square, Benny? You should be quoting some Ginsberg. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness. Or at least a little Bobby D. How many roads must a man walk down? In any case, Aitken and Nicholson talk shop while Donald Fletcher puts the screws to professional bank account man Mr. Harding.
Lori, how much is it he has scattered in those accounts all over the country?
Well, at the last total, it was slightly over $93,000, Mr. Fletcher.
Well, there was nothing dishonest. I had private investments. You can't prove a single...
Harding, all I want you to do is to keep your mouth shut and do the work the way I tell you.
Fletcher appears to only have eyes for Lori Stoner and every other woman he can get his mitts on.
Only it's getting late. You better beat it too. I've got a lot to do. So don't come back tonight, huh?
Company,
No. I just got some business.
but not mine.
That's right. So beat it now, baby.
Soon Fletcher ends up dead, and at first you think Aitken might have done it, but actually it's Alice with a Y, Aitken's wife, who gets arrested for the murder.
I didn't kill him. Honestly, I didn't.
But you did go to see Mr. Fletcher last night.
No, of course not.
Then how do your fingerprints appear so many places in his apartment?
I don't know. I can't explain it.
It's Paul who's got all the hard work, what with his having to do in-depth investigations of the world of strictly classy photography. Cue the clarinet.
Paul, I'd like to see if he's got copies of those pictures of Elise Aitken. You don't mind sticking around here for a while, do you?
No.
In court, Perry once again confronts fiery Deputy D.A. Sampson.
Mr. Mason would do well to stipulate that the defendant at about 3 o'clock in the morning murdered Donald Fletcher would save the taxpayers of this state the expense of a trial.
The major bombshell? Ben Garfinkel used to work at a girly magazine for Donald Fletcher to earn money so he could have the love of Alice Aitken. Be still my beatnik heart.
Because all I've wanted for 8 years was to clean my mind of her memory. I loved her too much, and she almost destroyed me for it.
In court, the main evidence involves the neighbor. We have a Dave Willock sighting, ladies and gents. Dave Willock, this is not a drill.
It had awakened my wife, and I'd gotten up to get her some medicine to help her sleep.
Well, did you consider calling Mr. Fletcher to complain?
Oh, yes, but a minute or two after Mrs. Aitken left, the music stopped. It came to the end of the record.
In a jailhouse visit, Perry gets the skinny from Alice.
You see, Mr. Mason, We were brought up in an orphanage in China. Our father was a sailor who just dumped us there. By the time we were 14, we had to earn our own living, and, well, that's why Millie is so afraid of being poor. And that's why I let her push me into making money. Anyway, at all. But Edmund understood. I mean, about the kind of life I'd had.
Back in court, Perry finds the real murderer, Lori Stoner. No! She's unrepentant.
I helped him with all of it. Every bit of dirty blackmail. And then he said he didn't need me anymore. I stayed there. I begged him. And then she came back. And when he tried to kiss her, when he knew I was still watching, I just couldn't stand it anymore. Yes, I killed Donald Fletcher. And it was the best thing I ever did in my life.
Meanwhile, Alice confesses she's out on Sis Millie. Perry trusted her, she trusted Aiken. Survey question: what happens to the magazine? Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. A Della is a deep dive on an actor or actress who guest starred on the episode. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul for this episode concerns Alice's story of an orphanage in China. Our Paul prompt: was this a thing? Did Americans, the abandoned offspring of sailors, ever end up in Chinese orphanages? I'm the proud cousin of a Chinese woman who my aunt adopted and brought to the States when my cousin was still a baby. I wonder if things ever went the other way. Let me know what you find, Pauls. Our Della for this episode could only be one man: Donald Fletcher, the irascible James Coburn.
They're all phonies, every single one of them.
Here's 10 about Fletch. Number 1, born Laurel, Nebraska, August 31st, 1928. Coburn grew up in LA and majored in acting at Los Angeles City College. Number 2, also spent some time at USC and made his professional stage debut at the La Jolla Playhouse, playing opposite Vincent Price in Billy Budd. Melville sighting! Number 3, in the early 1950s, studied with Stella Adler in New York, worked behind the scenes in television commercials. By the end of the 50s, he was back in LA on shows like Wagon Train and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Number 4, after playing macho sidekicks and villains in numerous westerns, action films, and Perry Mason episodes, he caught the public's attention in 1960 as the knife-throwing Brit in the film The Magnificent Seven.
Nobody throws me my own guns and says run. Nobody.
Number 5, Coburn hit his stride in the late 1960s. James Bond spy spoofs like Our Man Flint and In Like Flint.
The world is in turmoil. Frenzied diplomats turn to their computers and come up with the one individual on Earth who can snatch victory from defeat. Flint! 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 And here he is, the total man. Our man, Flint. James Coburn.
He also produced the comedy thriller The President's Analyst. Number 6, his box office appeal lost its shine in the 1970s, disappeared from the camera's eyes in the 1980s with the onset of painful arthritis, which he claims to have healed later in his life by taking pills with a sulfur base. Instead of acting, he started doing voiceover for a variety of television commercials and had a lucrative career with that work.
Show the world your U.S. Navy. Live the adventure. Call 1-800-327-NAVY.
By the time his film career was done, more than 100 films in all. Number 7, in the late 1980s, he returned to do some acting. He played a cattle rancher in Young Guns 2, a mysterious agent in the candy bars, a Scrooge who wanted to shut down St. Francis Academy in Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit. That's the one that has Lauryn Hill in it. And a philanthropist in the remake of The Nutty Professor. Number 8, he won a Best Supporting Actor Oscar in 1999 for the film Affliction, starring Nick Nolte, directed by Paul Schrader. Upon winning the Oscar, Coburn cradled the statuette and said, "Whoopee! It's nice. You can't describe the feeling. You can't really describe it because it's not even an emotion. It really hasn't settled in yet. I was moved so much I could hardly talk." Number 9, he ended his career with a series of TV credits: The Cherokee Kid, The Second Civil War, Proximity, Noah's Ark. Number 10, Coburn died November 18th, 2022 in Beverly Hills. He had a massive heart attack while listening to music with his wife, Paula. His manager, Hillard Elkins, said he died too early, but in his wife's arms. It's a pity and a loss for all of us. Coburn had 2 children. Our Perry for this episode is our man's soft spot for the arts.
Oh, and make out a check to the Pleiades Press for $100.
Hey, Benny boy, the cash is calling. Look who's throwing out $100 to anemic poetry mags over here. The theme for our episode is envy. It's always good to clarify our terms. This could have easily been the case of the jealous journalist. But no, it's the case of the envious editor. Jealousy? That's when you don't want someone else taking what's yours. You're worried you're going to lose it. Envy, on the other hand, is desiring what someone else has that you don't. If it's jealousy, well, then the title would have to refer to Mr. Aitken. He's worried about losing his wife. But the title's about envy, so we could be talking about Donald Fletcher. He wants Mrs. Aitken. He wants respectability. He wants to see the hypocrites around them get what's coming. You know what really gets his goat, though? It seems that Edmund and Alice are on the up and up. Can't do anything with that. And you know who else is envious? That would be Ben Garfinkel. There he goes, off to write the hit poem, Alone in My Principles. Shout out to That Thing You Do. That position is one he's been forced into. A spurned lover. He's envious, also of Edmund Aitken. Here's a proverb, and it doesn't even come from Perry. A sound heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones. Read it and believe it, Don and Ben. Now, it's time to hear a Perry proverb. In our last episode, we heard Lieutenant Tragg bemoaning the sob stories he's got to hear from arrested criminals. No one admits their guilt. Sure, everyone says they've been framed, of course. But we've said it before, and we'll say it again. Have you been paying attention to the cases in this series, Artie boy? Well, Perry has a proverb about doubting the police in this episode.
Man's own wife mixed up in a thing like this with a man like that.
Sometimes the police make mistakes, Mr. Nicholson.
By the way, this is another reason to doubt Ben Nicholson's poet card. I thought this guy was supposed to be an enemy of the man. He doesn't seem eager to rage against the machine at all. I'm calling shenanigans on this guy. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
There is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Each week in the water cooler, we give you deleted scenes, comedic outtakes that didn't make the episode's final cut. We have 3 from the case of the envious editor. Number 1, Edmund Aitken replaces Fletcher's generic jazz LP with Coltrane's My Favorite Things. Number 2, a montage of Millie Nash giving Alice orders about dresses, about men, about the cereal she selects, about her reading material, and of course, most importantly, about how to sort bullion cubes. And number 3, Ben Nicholson calls his nephew Jack to come and see him in LA. It's a crazy scene, he explains. Jack tells him he's already here, working on a little movie called Little Shop of Horrors. Let the reader understand. Our Paul prompt from last episode concerned crime commissions.
The governor wants to attack the narcotics problem, juvenile delinquency.
Aunt Mai was on the case. She filed this report. The high crime rate in the United States led to the formation of crime commissions at national, state, and city levels, aiming to study crime statistics, causes, laws, and enforcement, and to devise preventative measures and punishments. States involved included California, Georgia, Illinois, among others. In 1949, Senator Estes Kefauver formed a commission to study organized crime, petition from the American Municipal Association, and then in 1965, LBJ established the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice. And in fact, Nixon's election was in part due to his crime reduction platform. Very interesting. Thanks for doing that work, Aunt Mai. Now, let's hear a few listener letters. This week we heard from listener Jane, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jonathan. I discovered your podcast just recently. I'm an avid Perry Mason fan. I watch an episode at least once a day. I enjoy your podcast. I appreciate all the work you put into it. My comment is, every rich woman wears a fur coat of some sort. Sometimes even a hat and long gloves. Those poor actors must have sweated like crazy. But besides that, no one else is wearing coats inside except for these women wearing furs. And this is LA, where it is hot most of the year, isn't it? I laugh every time I see a fur on the show. Thanks again for the podcast." And thank you for the note, Jane. That's perceptive and hilarious. Last time we asked this survey question. What happens to Susan Connolly and James Anderson in the wake of the case of the larcenous lady? Do they get together romantically or not? Trivia maven Nancy wrote in with her survey results. She runs the Perry Loves Della Facebook group. 77% of respondents say Jim and Susan became a couple. 22% say au contraire, no they didn't. 1% didn't know. Thanks for that, Nancy. This week's survey question, what happens to Aitken Publishing? Does it hold? Does it fold? Or does it get sold? Let me know what you think. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have a comment on the episode or the pod in general? Drop me a line at theperrypod@gmail.com. Join us next time as bribery, blackmail, and murder get so thick it makes a man want to cry, "Citizens reform! Citizens reform!" It's the case of the resolute reformer. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat!